The end of year holidays are now just a few weeks away, and for many people around the world, late December is synonymous with bubbles. Here in France, of course, the crème de la crème is champagne, but in today's Entre Nous, we're going to focus on another kind of sparkling wine that is absolutely booming out of England. This year, an English fizz became the very first non-champagne to be named the world's top sparkling wine. Well, we're going to talk about all this now with British wine expert Julia Harding, who joins me now live. Julia, thank you so much for being with us on Entre Nous. First of all, tell us a bit more about British sparkling wine. What is it exactly?
Well, it's has to be should be referred to as English sparkling wine, although it is made in England and Wales. It's has a lot of similarities with the way champagne is made, in that it's the same grape varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and it also is made in what's called the traditional method. It used to be called the champagne method, but of course you're only allowed to say that if you're in Champagne. So it's the traditional method whereby the second fermentation that gives the wine its sparkle happens in the bottle rather than in a tank. So those two things make it very similar to champagne.
Right. The
One of the
real question
differences,
is, well, before you get into the differences, the real question
yeah.
is can English sparkling wine ever really replace champagne?
Well, at the moment, the really big obstacle would be the volumes made. So a typical number of bottles of English sparkling wine would be about 12 million bottles a year on average. And champagne in 2023, which was a big vintage, made nearly 300 million bottles. So the volume, there's no way English sparkling wine is going to threaten champagne, but it's a good alternative. And the quality is excellent for the top wines.
So you were saying a moment ago that it is different from champagne. What else makes it different beside the fact that you'll just never have as much of it?
Well, I think there are two reasons. One is that brings difference. One is that the climate is still cooler. You know, we're further north than Champagne, and it means that the growing season is longer. That brings with it potential problems, but it does mean that you tend to get slightly more aromatic fruit flavors from the grapes. And the other thing is, because of the climate, you get very high acidity, which is absolutely necessary for good sparkling wine. But in the past, it's been a problem because it's been too high and people have found the wines a bit too acidic. So those would be the main differences: a little bit more aromatic fruit flavors and slightly higher acidity.
And now English sparkling wines are really having a moment. They regularly beat cava, prosecco, even champagne in blind taste tests. So what really has changed? Is it just the climate, that the climate is different, which is making the UK produce such great quality sparkling wines now, or is there something else that's changed?
Well, I think if you compare with Prosecco, you're not really comparing like with like, because they don't tend to be made from the same grape varieties in the traditional method. But the big difference, I would say, has been climate change in the last 20 years or so. It's definitely been getting warmer, more chaotic as well, which brings its own problems. But the really good thing about the majority of sparkling wines or traditional method is that you can make them with, you can add a little bit of another vintage to the main vintage. So if you have a really difficult one, you can add a little bit of another vintage that maybe was a little bit richer or riper. But this climate change has really meant that the grapes are riper. So you get a much better balance between fruit flavor and acidity, whereas in the past it could have been just too high acidity and a sort of unripe green appley sort of flavors. But that's much less common now.
So apparently, some big name French champagne producers have already purchased land in southeast England, starting to grow their own grapes. What do you think about that? Is that something that they can do and still be called champagne, or will that also be English sparkling wine?
No, I'm sure they would love to call it champagne, but unfortunately they can't. You can only make champagne from within the Champagne region, and according to all of the regulations set out in the legally in the wine law. So it'll have to be called English sparkling wine. But I can see why they're doing it. It's getting, because of climate change. There, some people are worrying a little bit about champagne vineyards. So if it's very hot, you have to pick almost too early. You have to pick before the sugar gets too high, but sometimes the sugar ripeness is rushing ahead and you haven't got the flavor ripeness, and you need both to be in sync to make a really nice wine. So they're buying in a country or in region in the south of England that's a little bit cooler, so they can still get that really lovely fresh acidity that makes the best sparkling wines.
Julia, just before you go, you mentioned England, Wales. Are there other up and coming countries when it comes to sparkling wine production now, or is the UK the one to beat?
Well, I think sparkling wine is one of the best options for a cool climate. And I'm just at the moment working on a new book about it's called the World Atlas of Wine. And we've got new maps in there, and that reflects some of the new regions where wine is being made. So Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they're all in there, and the Belgium, Holland, but also Scandinavia. I mean, I was in Sweden not long ago, and they're making some really nice wines. They can't grow easily the varieties that are the best for sparkling wine, but they're making some very good wines just because of climate change. So much further north.
All right, Julia, thank you so much for speaking to us. That's wine expert Julia Harding. Thank you so much. Thanks to
You're
you for
welcome.
watching
Thank
France
you.
24. Do stay with us.